2, body position, integrating the scope and the gun, drills to include load, ready, trigger pull, cycling the action, reload, immediate actions, both live and dead trigger, and we'll fold safety precautions and the unload into that, then on to basic principles of shooting, and finally cleaning and pre-fire checks. This should get us out to the range. Body position falls under cognitive ballistics, making sure that you have the best opportunity based on your body position to hit your target. Integrating the scope and the gun is of the utmost importance. That marries up your sight with the internal, external ballistics, begins the marry up of internal, external ballistics. Your drills, you want to make these repeatable, fast, accurate, and reliable. There's many ways to skin the cat. We're going to skin it this way. Basic principles of shooting, that's all about lining up the target, the gun, the shooter's breath, how the trigger is pulled, and then the follow through of all that to reacquire that target if need be, if you're out hunting. Cleaning and pre-fire checks. It starts to really work on the internal ballistics of the gun. We want to make sure we clean it the same way each time, or have a pattern. Every 10 cleanings, I do a deep cleaning. Something like that, where the bore and the chamber, all the tolerances are very much the same. We don't want to have the bore all lubed up really with a lot of oil. And then the next time we go and there's not a lot of oil, that'll impact the velocity of the bullet. With cleaning and pre-fire checks, we'll also include the function test. We want to make sure that our trigger, our action, everything's working on the gun, ready to go if need be. This will help us build up our cognitive ballistics, our internal ballistics with our sight, our external ballistics to our target, with consideration for our backdrop. Precision throughout, consistency as much as possible. As we develop more dynamic shots, we're going to lose some of these, so we want to have as much as we can to keep our cone of fire tight. Your immediate actions, known as IAs, to include live trigger, dead trigger, safety precautions, and the unload. From here, we're going to move outside. I'm going to demo a few things. We'll continue to evolve Jess as a shooter, and she'll demonstrate a few things as well. Welcome to the lab, otherwise known as my backyard. The gun is pointed at our paper target downrange, and that her spine and her legs are all nice and straightly aligned, creating a nice line between the target, the gun, and Jess. So lots of people, when it comes to long range shooting, they like to say to have your feet splayed out like that. And if that works for you, that's all fine. I personally don't like that, especially as we go up in caliber. Once you start getting into the 50 caliber zone, you'll notice that your body starts actually getting pushed back, and that changes the dynamic of the shot a lot. So I prefer to have my feet dug in a little bit. I don't want to put undue strain through my body. So you're not always dug in, but when you're about to take your shot, you want to load your bipod a bit, and then that'll help keep your body nice and aligned, because that's where you want to zero from. Nice relaxed body position, naturally aligned to the target. Feet like that. We start with the 100% solution. We try to be as precise, right? We're building precision from the cognitive end out to the terminal end. However, this will be sacrificed. We'll have to move into other body positions, kneeling, standing. We'll be off-canted, we'll be off-hand at times. We want to be able to shoot in all configurations and try to keep some things consistent. From here back,
is really not all that important. What's very important is the way your shoulder loads into the butt. You want to keep that as consistent as possible. The looser you are, that'll change the velocity dynamics of the bullet. Or if you push in harder on another shot, you want to try to keep that as consistent as possible so that the rifle doesn't move. The gun is being pulled into her shoulder at a consistent pressure right here in the shoulder, and her hand is holding on to the pistol grip in a way that will help prevent it from canting when the round's shot. As the bullet travels through the barrel, it wants to twist the gun. Depending on a left or a right hand twist in your rifling, it'll twist the gun one way or the other. You want to support that. The idea here is to make a vise-like setup so that you can have good shot follow through. And if you're out big game hunting or something, if you for some reason need a second shot, you're ready to go. Okay, that's body position. The next thing we need to do is integrate the scope to the gun. We've begun integrating Jess's body to the gun, and now we want to integrate the scope to the gun and Jess's eye. Obviously this gun is unloaded and made safe. For most of the things we'll do, the action will be open. So Jess, first thing I'll get you to do is get comfortable behind the butt. And we're going to introduce the first accessory that I think all shooters should have. For the price of a bipod and the weight, if you're just shooting at 50 meters all the time or within 100 yards, something like that, yeah, maybe you don't need a bipod, but I think it's an excellent tool, weight to bang ratio. But the next thing we're going to introduce is the beanbag. There's all kinds of beanbags out there. I just like the shooting sack style. You can use it really well in the butt stock area. If you're doing modified shooting, you can use it to help stabilize the gun. Again, not very heavy and really adds a lot of control, especially when you're zeroing. If you're moving into like the bench rest shooting zone, there's all kinds of options to help lock it in. So Jess, get that under there if you can fit that while still we already covered the scope in depth. We want to make sure that the exit pupil of the diopter is lined up with Jess's eye, somewhere around 3 or 4 inches. So she's in her body position right now, in her prone position, her 100% solution. She should be able to sleep there. It should feel very low impact on her neck. It should be very comfortable in the butt of the gun. It's right where she wants to lock in and take the shot so that the light is at the perfect angle at the back of her eye through her pupil. Jess, does that feel comfortable?
Yeah. How do you want me to hold the bag?
Just like that's fine. As we go, we'll develop shooting bag. You'll see that sometimes you want it on the other end, sometimes you want it like that, but that's a shooter preference. If you notice, she's pulling back on the butt stock a little bit. I do recommend that one again, especially as you get into the bigger caliber guns, to save the gun from bouncing around. We have a bit of an issue with COVID. Some of our choices really did end up getting limited, especially because this was a custom build that we had done at a gunsmith. So we have a Picatinny system over a Weaver system. So we've had to do some slight modifications, and in that the scope only sits in one place on the base rail. These are all nicely, they've been tapped into the action, nice and set, good and solid, but it's limiting a little bit of where we can put our scope. So our scope has very few places to go. Put it in place, snug up the rings. This is an integrated base system for these rings, very nice and stable. Got that snugged in, so Jess is super comfortable. The diopter, back it all the way out, put your locking ring all the way forward, and see how much thread you have. You want to put the edge of the diopter adjustment halfway so that you can dial in diopter, or you can remove some if you need to. That changes the exit pupil. So if Jess moves into a different shooting position, she'll be farther away from it or closer. She can adjust for it. As her eye fatigues during the day, she can adjust that exit pupil as well. Now the scope's in there, it's able to move. Jess is going to tell me, she's looking through her ocular lens, and inside she's building up, she can see the reticle, correct?
Yeah.
And then you can see there'll be scope shadow or there'll be no shadow. You want it to be perfectly in the middle. Some people like to have some scope shadow and help you make sure you get that perfect eye relief in a pinch. But right now we have the ability to move the scope forward and backwards. So what's going to happen is I'm all full magnification and I'm going to move it until Jess can see the crosshairs nice and clear and the image is perfectly aligned inside, and we'll try to get a close-up of that with the camera. So which way?
That's good. No, go back. Okay, that's good.
Okay, so your body position is nice and relaxed. And that image inside the ocular ring is not zoomed in, and you'll see, we'll try to capture that in the camera, or zoomed out. It's perfectly around the edge, correct?
Yes, okay.
When you're adjusting your eye relief, don't stretch your neck or compress your neck. Put it very comfortable, nicely resting on the buttstock. Is it good there? And then we'll move. Should I go in or out?
Can you try in?
So describe to the listener or the viewer what you're seeing.
I'm seeing a dark ring, a dark shadow around the image.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know. Can you go the other way? Okay, that's better. Yeah, keep going. Keep going.
As you can see, this is best done with two people, but you can do this by yourself very easily.
Yeah, that's perfect.
As of right now, it's on full magnification, and that's only about 15 meters away, so you're not going to get a clear image. We're just trying to set up the eye relief, which only involves the reticle back for now.
Yeah,
it is soaking up light from this end.
It just looks like a brown blur of, I guess, the wall that I'm looking at, but there's very little shadow. There's actually still more shadow. Can you keep going?
When you look through there, there's the image of the reticle. There's the clear glass lines. They should touch the edge of the shadow perfectly.
Yeah.
Or be a little bit less, but consistent around them. So how does that look there?
Perfect.
That looks perfect?
Perfect.
We still have some fine tuning in the ocular adjustment to get it dialed in perfectly. We just want to get it very close for now. We're going to just give it a little bit of a snug, not jam it in place. And then somewhere on your scope ring and your scope, you can use your handy dandy marker to mark your lines. You see it here?
Oh, yeah.
That just keeps it in adjustment. With these more high-end scopes, the tolerances in the tubes, everything's so good that I could probably take that all apart, put it back together, and it'll be very much the same. So two people with different eye reliefs could use this scope and this setup. This is Jess's gun though, so it's hers the way to go. I just wanted to mention something on the scope rings. When you put them on the base rail, make sure they're nice and snug, tight, pressing the solid ends against the rail. So these sides move. They're loose behind the nut. All right, so our eye relief is set up now. Now what we want to do is we want to do a quick bore sight, lining up the scope to the bore the best we can. Downrange, we have a piece of paper with a dot on it. This is just printed out from our computer. Jess, if you could remove the bolt, please. On this one, on this gun, there's a button here, a little detent you press in, and then the bolt can be released. Just place it off to the side, fold your buttstock to the side. Back. Yeah, for this one, as you can see, Jess is learning this. We went out shooting a couple times, but this is all pretty much fully new to her. Use your beanbag under your pistol grip. Now, not all guns are you going to be able to take out the bolt so nicely and do all this, but this is just a rough bore sight. So put your bore on the dot.
Okay.
And then try to leave it there with your beanbag as solid as possible so you can pull away. Pretty close?
Yeah.
All right, now look through the scope relief there. Where is the crosshair? We want to line the crosshair over where the bore is seeing that dot. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
The dot is in the middle of the bore, and then we want to line up our crosshairs with
the
that.
crosshairs are pretty difficult to see right now.
Okay, does
I
this
can
help?
still see a little bit.
So we could use the focus knob. It probably won't do anything with the crosshairs.
Okay, no, not much.
So here, I'll do this. That was magnified all the way out. Does that help?
Okay, stop really quick. Yes.
All right, make sure your bore is lined up on the circle.
Okay.
Now tell me which way I got to move the crosshair to.
Down.
So the crosshair is high of the dot, you're saying?
Yeah.
How much? Let me know if it moves.
Oh, it's going the wrong way.
So it's got to go up.
It's got to go, well, no, now you're moving the crosshair down to the dot.
That's what I want to do, yeah.
Okay.
This is just a quick bore sight shooters to get you close for when we go out to the range, it's not all over. Once we get to the range, we'll do a berm shoot and we'll pick a big old backstop to get it even closer. How is it for left and right, Jess?
Okay. You can go right a few. Okay, that's good. That's perfect.
Okay, so that's roughly bore sighted. I'll adjust these caps after. So now the next thing we want to do is start to level the scope. There's a whole bunch of different ways to do that, and we'll get to that in a second. Okay, put the gun back together. A little button right there, perfect. Lock it away. Alrighty, so now we got a rough bore sighting going on. Jess's eye relief's pretty good to go. Now we're going to start marrying up the scope with the gun and more accuracy. There's a bunch of different ways to do this. This scope has a flat base underneath. The manufacturer ensures that that flat bottom is level with the reticle, so that if you flatten that out perfectly level, that means your reticle will be perfectly level. Some manufacturers might say that, and you know, it's wishful thinking. I would say once you start getting into the higher end scopes, that starts to make sense. All right, we have this wedge to start to flatten it out. It goes in between on both sides, kind of gets us close. It'll be pretty equal.
What is that? Just a keychain?
This is just a keychain. There are shims that people have. That's just literally my house keys. Shims that are exactly made to do that. As we talked about though, we're trying to do this without that. So again, snug up just a little bit more on your scope rings. We want it to still be able to move a little bit. We still got some leveling functions to do. And I'm going to level out the chassis. So just turn the gun a little bit counterclockwise so that it levels out. All right, so that's not necessarily perfect because the action may be a little off from the chassis. This again is a higher end chassis, so it should be pretty accurate. Quick check to see if your scope is level. You can use the caps. That looks pretty good. I would recommend using them all. These aren't meant to be level. Just a quick indicator. Looking pretty good. Looking pretty good. Now what's going to happen is Jess is going to get comfy on her gun. She's nice and comfortable behind the gun. She's looking through. Jess, zoom in and out to where you can get that line. So now on our paper that we printed out, there's a line that runs vertically. We're going to line up the vertical reticle of the scope. By the way, when we put up that piece of paper, it was level as well. And then Jess, focus in or out as you need to get that image.
Okay. So I can see the image super well, but the crosshairs are... Oh, I can see them. Okay.
Okay. So we had a rough ocular zero reaching up. So I'll hold her zoom or magnification from moving.
Just testing out to see which is better.
Get them crosshairs nice and crispy. So Jess is using the focus knob. That focuses the target to the reticle. It's too close to get a real focus though on a full magnification. For this high powered scope, 20 meters, you're not gonna get that in focus. What we're trying to do here is we're trying to line up the vertical crosshair with the vertical plumb line. The line is plumb, we leveled it out with our level, and we wanna see if the reticle is level. We'll do this here at close range just to get close, and as we progress through the chapters, we'll do this a little bit farther out because we want, as we dial the turret up and down, we don't want it to dial up and down on an angle. We want it to dial up and down perfectly. So Jess, can you see a little bit of the vertical reticle?
The line that's going up and down?
Yes.
Yes.
Can you see a little bit of the vertical line in distance?
I can see the line in the distance much clearer.
Okay, try to put the reticle line over the line and see how plumb they are. If one lines up pretty smoothly over the other one.
They line up.
They line up pretty good. All right, so for now we're gonna go ahead and call that level. We'll tighten up the scope rings, going from one side to the other, front to back. By no means is this the final leveling, but now we're pretty close. I'm going to give them a little bit of a snug, and then we'll move into bore sighting. All this is in most of every scope manufacturer has their own little procedures for doing all this. All manuals have this kind of info. I'm not going to belabor this. The idea though is you want your scope to track up and down perfectly, as perfect as possible. All right, so our scope is set. We have our markings. We're going to set up our scope level. Sorry about the reach around. Without moving the level, start to tighten it up. Jess, you good in level there?
Helps.
All right, now that we have the scope level to the gun, it's not super crucial that the gun itself is level because we want the scope to be level. And now we're gonna level our level with the scope. So Jess, line that up on the paper. She's gonna line up those vertical lines. I'm gonna confirm with the rule, the house level. Come this way a little bit. A little bit more, just. All right, and then the level. Again, the manufacturer of these bubble levels will have instructions for you. How's the level? Where is it perfectly in the middle of those lines, Jess?
That's good.
So we'll tighten that up. Just as a confirmatory, check your vertical line. How does it look?
Great.
Okay, I'll check this. Looks pretty good. How's our bubble level? You want to level it off?
Okay.
So everything's pretty square. As we start pushing out greater and greater distances, we'll check that to make sure it's good to go. Make sure everything's snug on there. Make sure your scope is snug. We'll cover that all in pre-fire checks. All right, now that we have the scope integrated with the gun, we need to go through some drills so that Jess knows how to shoot this gun. First bit, we're gonna go over the load, ready, trigger pull, cycling the action, the reload, the immediate actions, live trigger and dead trigger, safety precautions and unload, and then some of the basic principles of shooting. So next we're going to cover drills. Jess needs to know how to shoot and operate this weapon to make it work at the range. We're going to cover load, ready, trigger pull, cycling the action, reload, immediate actions, live trigger, dead trigger, safety precautions, and the reload. And then we'll do the basic principles of shooting. It sounds like a mouthful, and it is, but don't overcomplicate it. There's many ways to do these drills. All right, you're gonna see us putting bullets in the sun or not in the sun. Right now, we're not worried about it. We're not actually shooting. These are live rounds, so at no point are we gonna load that here in the backyard into the gun. I just wanna show you something. When you're loading your rounds, the kind of consistency you want. See, if I come in and I start scraping the casing along the bullet, I'm actually changing the shape of the bullet. I'm taking away weight and I'm scratching it, so it'll impact its ballistic coefficients, its ability to fly through the air stable. So push down, try not to scratch the casing, nice and gently in, all the way to the back. Make sure it's good and seated. Be precise even in how you load your magazine. Jess, I'm going to take a second, give that a go. So most magazines are going to be shaped, tapered towards where the bullet goes. The lip is lower here, and the keepers are at the back generally.
It also has this arrow here. Is that?
No, that's probably a manufacturer marking.
So butt end first?
Butt end first. Press down on the back. Yeah, perfect. Try not to scrape along those casings, help keep those expansion rates the same. All right, so that's the magazine loaded. I'm just gonna go ahead and unload this because we don't have any dummy rounds. We're gonna use empty magazines and we're gonna pretend, make believe land, like things are going into the gun. So Jess, for now, is going to have her mags off to the left side. You'll see as we go along, there'll be loose rounds here for single hand loading. There'll be magazines, and eventually they'll move into her pockets and she'll index them from her pocket. But now we're just gonna start from the left side. So magazines loaded. Jess, load the gun, please. Give it a little tug. All right. These are pretty tight tolerances, these mags into these chassis. Plus the gun's basically brand new, so there's nothing that's been worked in. You saw how she loaded it, gave it a little tug down to make sure it's seated, okay? You don't have to. I recommend loading with the action to the rear as Jess did. That way there you're not jamming the bullet up against the bolt. And then when you scrape the bolt back, it could scratch up the bullet a little bit. Not a big deal, but like we said, we're trying to be precise every step of the way. So now she's loaded. Jess, go ahead and ready. Ready means we are loading a cartridge into the gun. Don't forget to put it on safe. For this, we're going to use the ready. We're going to place it on safe. As we transition, we're not going to almost ever have it on safe. There are ranges out there, static ranges, that will require this as part of your drills to have it on safe. Loaded, ready. Now the next thing she needs to do is acquire her target and get ready to shoot. So as we develop, you'll see that the whole impact of this with shooting principles will evolve. For now, we're just going to worry about the trigger pull portion of it. So Jess, take up a bit of a sight picture on your target that you intend to shoot. There's a few ways. You notice how her hand is up along here. She's still gripping the pistol grip, preventing that cant. Some people like to shoot like this, especially when you're zeroing. The way our fingers and thumbs collapse on each other, the way our bodies work, it's hard to pull straight back towards your thumb. That's why if you go off, there's less impact from your thumb on the trigger pull. So Jess, go ahead and give us a shot on target. Weapon off safe, trigger pull, nice and smooth. We'll get into some advanced stuff. So now she cycles the action, she ejects the round, go right into that drill, and do that the same all the time. When Jess is cycling the action, she's pulling it straight up and pushing it straight down. She's coming back with the same force and she's going forward with the same force. You want to keep that very consistent. If I roll the action, I'm rolling the gun. If I slam it down and roll it, as you can see, it starts adding cant. You want to make sure it's all very smooth, so that as we move on, it doesn't impact your follow-on shot. So now she's cycled the action. We're going to talk about reload just before we get into the IAs, because when you're doing long range shooting, it's not so much an immediate action necessarily. It's more like a general reload. So Jess, action to the rear. All right, she's ran out of ammo, reload. So notice how she pushes with her finger to keep it out of the way of the mag. It drops out. You may have to pull it out, especially on a dusty day. Listen for the audible click. No need to put it on safe. We'll talk through that. Hold this one more time to show it more appropriately. Okay, now finish up what you're doing. Now she's ready to carry on. She decides if she needs to carry on or not. For this long gun, just some quick IAs. There's two that we'll cover. Live trigger and a dead trigger. A live trigger is you hear an audible click like this. A dead trigger, you pull and you don't hear anything. For the audible trigger, could be a few things. Your magazine might not be seated and it didn't scoop up around as you move forward. Could be broken parts within the gun, broken firing pin, broken springs, or it could be faulty ammo. With a dead trigger, it could be unsafe or broken parts, or you just didn't ready your gun. So if the gun's unready, it'll be a dead trigger. If it's unsafe, it'll be a dead trigger. So live trigger, you attempt to fire and you have a live trigger. All right, you're going to rack the action to the rear and you're going to watch for an ejected casing or an ejected cartridge. All right, if nothing comes out, rack the action forward. And by this point, you'll know if you're scooping up a round. Without a round, it goes in and out very easily into battery. With a round on the bolt face, you can feel it pushing in. So if you don't feel a round being pushed in, you may have to do a reload or something else. All right, you attempt to fire. You have a live trigger, you rack the action. You're watching for that spent casing, ejected cartridge, and then you carry on. The drill is exactly the same for a dead trigger. I'm not going to show it because it's exactly the same. Rack the action. If you have to go beyond 2 tries, you need to move on to something else. It may be broken parts, could be the mag is empty. Like I said, with long range precision shooting, you should know when your 5 rounds are spent. All right, we're going to cover the safety precautions, which will roll into the unload. So before you do any cleaning, anything like that, if you pick up a gun and you don't know the state of it, you need to do safety precautions. All right, come across this gun. Jess just says she's getting down behind it to shoot. She doesn't know the state of it. First thing you'll do is attempt to put it on safe. You'll rack the action to the rear, and then you'll drop the magazine. So this is another one of those ones, it's all semantics. Some people like to drop the magazine first and then rack the action. That's all your prerogative. The reason I don't do that is if this has some ammo in it still and it's in place, and I want to shoot anyways, I rack the action, something comes out, something might not come out, but at least I can just get back into shooting right away. Again, that's all semantics. And that's basically the unload as well. So Jess, if you could load up a magazine. Action ready. Yep. No, you put it on safe. So remember, it goes on safe after the ready if you want. At some point, we're not going to do that anymore. Okay. So Jess is done firing. Safety precautions are attempt to put it on safe. Just attempt to put it on safe. Don't go to fire. So safety precautions, finger off the trigger for as much as possible, Jess, unless you're ready to shoot. We're going to be high precision shooters, so we're going to see some stuff like that. So safety precautions, attempt to put it on safe, rack the action to the rear, unload the magazine, visually and physically inspect the bolt face and chamber. If it is nighttime, do this with light. I don't know how many times in the history of shooting people have had negligent discharges because they didn't feel the necessity to physically and visually inspect that chamber. All right, safety precaution, that also covers the unload. Jess, if you could go ahead and load and ready, please. So Jess just made a comment to me about your eye. Jess, what were you saying?
Oh yeah, just the eye strain is intense.
So with the image being out of focus, it's going to add to the eye strain. Your eye is trying to focus itself, so it's straining. When you're behind the gun, especially for extended periods of time, you will get scope fatigue if you just keep blazing through those optics. But your eye, I find, gets stronger over time. Jess, being literally brand new to this, is going to have a little bit of a weaker eye.
Also, terrible eyes.
Yeah. So we've covered some body position. We've looked at integrating the scope to the gun, leveling it off, getting it roughly bore sighted in place to get to the range. We talked a little bit about some drills. Just whatever it is, keep it consistent. Work that bolt the same way. Build up all those drills the same ways. So shooting principles. This is another one of those things that seems to be debated in a polarized way pretty adamantly. And I don't really give a shoot how you do it. I'm going to start by going from the target backwards, and that's how Jess will start to develop it until she develops her own patterns. So the idea of shooting principles is to get as close to that 100% solution before we have to sacrifice things in order to hit the target, drop the big game animal. It all starts with aligning the target and the gun and the sight and your eyes as naturally as possible. So even before you get down behind the gun, make sure it's roughly pointed towards your target.
Yep.
Is it there, Jess?
Yep.
And that your body's, like, everything's already natural alignment. They call it natural alignment. We want to make sure it's naturally aligned. So target, Jess, if you mind, get behind your gun, please. Get comfortable with your eye relief and all that. It doesn't have to be perfectly in focus as we move through. So first thing, the target is aligned with the gun, is aligned with the sights, is aligned with her eye. Her body is aligned with all that. The gun, the sights, Jess's body all nicely aligned. We're going to talk a bit about breathing. Until it's like really time to shoot, just be as natural in your breath as possible. You want to be calm. This is a game of being calm. The more tension in your body and your breath, the more tension will be in the shot, giving you a more chance of messing up the shot. Here's where we're going to diverge a little bit from some traditional thoughts. So that's all naturally aligned. Jess is ready to drop into her scope. We're going to mention it. She's going to kind of just pretend to do it because she can't do it because the target's too close. She's going to remove her parallax. So she's lining up to the target. She's going to remove her parallax with the focus knob. All right, we'll say it's there. As I introduced when I introduced the scope, you're moving your head up and down slightly to make sure it doesn't move off the target. You can go left and right or up and down. I prefer up and down. I'm not exactly sure why. It's just how I built it up.
You said I won't be able to take all of it out?
No, she won't be able to get it all out because it's so close. Just get it close, Jess.
Close?
It's close. And then she'll level her bubble. All right, now she's breathing nice and easy. The last thing she did was level her bubble. She's back onto her sights are on her target. Again, many ways to do this. We're going to do the countdown, 5 seconds. So 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. At 5, you can start holding your breath and start applying pressure to the trigger. This gun's really handy because you can tell when it's cocked because the action is to the rear. So if you look here, so that means it's cocked. If you look, once it's fired, you don't see that. So you know right away when it's back that the action is readied. All right, so when you come out, you can take a quick look at that. Oh, I'm on safe and I am ready to go, or oh, I'm not ready to go. Rack the action. Right, Jess? Mm-hmm. Okay, she's gonna load that bipod. She's gonna pull in a little bit on her butt. She's gonna keep whatever that is, 10 pounds of pressure. She wants 10 pounds of pressure right there. Her feet are dug in, her body's nice and relaxed. Otherwise, slowly start pulling back on that trigger. Nice. Now follow through. The idea here is to lock the gun in place so that you can take on that next shot. As soon as the shot falls, you want to get that next round in there in case you have to take a follow-up shot if you wound the animal, you might be able to get that second shot in there. Or if it's a competition, you want to get it ready and in the game as fast as possible to keep the environmental effects the same. The idea also with follow through is to keep the gun stable until the bullet leaves the barrel. Now it's traveling up there close to 3,000 feet per second, some guns even faster. Doesn't take too long to get out of there, but you want to keep those conditions the same. And then right away after follow through, set back up for that next shot. That's part of your follow through. So for Jess, you just noticed she came down, she looked at the bubble. Parallax shouldn't have changed much unless you got a running animal or something. With a stationary target, it won't change. You want to make sure you're level again quickly. It's just a quick little look, back down, back on the sights, and if you need to take that follow-on shot, you're ready to go. All right. Jess, now that we're all set to go with our drills, we'll move into cleaning and pre-fire checks, and then we'll be all ready to go for the range, our zeroing, and all the fun stuff that comes with that.
Gun cleaning and pre-fire checks. We're starting to move into the realm of a topic that has many opinions on it. Do this, don't do that, this is how you do this is how you do that. What you're looking for is that precision, that consistency among what you do each time. So when you clean your gun, it's the same each time. Once you do your pre-fire checks, your gun is ready to go to the range and transition from being clean, pre-fire checks, into shooting. Everything is done as consistent as possible. So when things get inconsistent, like during a competition or on the hunt, everything is good to go. All right, with the weapon pointed in a safe direction, ensuring if you have an ND, it will go out that way. I attempt to place the weapon on safe. I unload it, rack the action, visually and physically inspect it as clear and that there is no mag. The weapon is now had safety precautions carried out. It is now unloaded. We're good to go to start our cleaning. Remember, cleaning is your procedure. I'm just going to give you some principles. The idea is precision. You do it the same every time. That's the whole idea. There's going to be all kinds of companies and brands out there telling you, no, you got to do this, you got to do this, you got to do that. Most of the time you don't, okay? What you want to do is you want to do the same thing each time so that when you get out to the range, your first shot is very similar to your last shot, and if not, it's very predictable. All right, we'll go through, we'll open this up, blah, 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 blah. I personally like to use gloves. All this stuff is known carcinogenics. Most chemicals you should use gloves, shooters, not just for shooting. Keep that out of your skin, keep your nervous system nice and healthy. They may not look the coolest, but they do the job. All right, releasing that bolt. We've carried out our safety precautions. We'll just place that aside. This is, like I said, you're playing jazz here. You can start by lubricating it, letting the oil set in. The reason you might want to do that is as the oil sets in, it can pull out corrosion and fouling. You don't really need oil on the face. You want to keep that dry, make sure it's got no brass filings and stuff like that. We'll let that sit for a little bit. The oil will soak in. I'm gonna come over here, grab my handy cleaning rod, jag, board brush, and push through. Start assembling this. Remember, keep this consistent. We want to use the same methods each time. All right, don't just ram it in there, gently guide it into the chamber. A lot of people are very sensitive about this. They want their chamber to remain the same. Think about everything you do all the way down to the atomic level. You want that steel to be as consistent as possible. Don't pull it back in, let it come out, detach it. All right. You want to be as gentle as possible on your crown, although they are pretty hardy. They can handle a little damage. Studies show that after the first shot, usually that damage is gone. It's been cleared out of the way, but that's not what you want when you're about to pull the trigger on competition day. All right, you run the brush through a couple times, then we go to the jag. Plastic tips, they're nice. I'm not so worried about it damaging it. Get it to the end. With the patch, you could pull it back through, but then you could potentially be bringing that fouling back through the barrel, back through the bore, back through the chamber. Remember, you're building up your own way of doing this. So now we've ran that through a few times. You can put some oil, the gun solvent, and that kind of stuff. Pretty much sums up the cleaning rods. What we can do is a little bit of cleaning in the chamber. Use a little bit of oil inside the chamber. This around so you can see. Switch my sides. Cleaning, pulling the fouling away to the back, down low, inside the chamber. This is why some people get chamber cleaning tools. With the bolt actions, they don't get super dirty. They get a little bit, but nothing too serious. Eventually we will add in a chamber cleaning tool to make that a little bit better. You want to make sure everything's good to go. Okay. Cleaned up our glass, bringing it to the outside. Keeping in mind this isn't a bench rest shooter. You want to grab some at the front. Bringing it all out, bringing the dirt to the edges, and coming around with it. Trying not to grind that sand into your glass. Keep it good for a long time. All right, we're back, basically ready to start getting this back together. Bolt in, lock it up. Now we want to do a function test to make sure everything's working. So with the weapon pointed in a safe direction, we'll bring the action to the rear. It goes through smoothly, down, attempt to put on safe, then attempt to fire. It shouldn't fire. Fire, hold the trigger, come over top, come down and forward. It shouldn't lock the firing pin to the rear, all right? Then you come back up, one more, firing pin locked to the rear, fire's good. So it's all back together. We know our action is working. We need to do our pre-fire checks. I have my bank of Allen keys here. It doesn't matter where you start on the gun, but remember, you want to do it with precision, the same way each time. I'll start here. I make sure my muzzle brake is tight. I make sure my barrel is not loose. It's not, you can tell, free-floating barrel bounces around a bit. Make sure my bipod is on there nice and tight. This is where you can check things too. Okay, does my bipod close good? Yeah, it works great. You don't want to be surprised come game day. Scope rings. Make sure your scope's in there nice and tight. Something I like to check. My scope rings are nice and tight. I go across one side to the other. Snug plus a quarter on these bad boys. I use this tool to make sure my caps are still on good. We don't want those popping off. We don't have to reef them down. Checking all the scope rings coming down. These ones here you want to make sure are nice and tight. Snug plus a quarter. Snug plus a quarter. We're not looking to snap those bolts. We want them in there tight, but not too tight. Brings us to these bad boys. So on the chassis, these don't move too much though, because they're Loctited, but we don't try to move them. We just want to make sure they're not loose, and then we do the other side. Very important to get in there and tighten up the chassis action mounts. Get those in there. Make sure that's all good. very important one here. So I don't have, in doing these videos, we didn't want to have all the top-notch tools, everything the best. We wanted to try to keep as much as we could available around the house. Now, you can see I have this Allen key. It fits in both ways. So in the front one, it works out all good. Remember, snug in a bit. This is probably somewhere around, I'm guessing 70 pounds of torque or something. It's pretty tight. Those two set the action, and you do not want that to move around. So on this back one though, it's too deep for me to get that in there. So what I use sometimes, crescent wrench, holding it in place, and make sure it's good. We're not looking to break threads, but we want to make sure those are tight. You can check your handles. Again, this is your system. You can check everything in depth every single time, or you could wait every 10 times you do a more thorough. The principles don't change. Step back, make sure I've done everything. So I've tried my action works, done my pre-fire check by tightening up everything. Some people like to make sure their turrets are all zeroed out and they're at the magnification they're ready to go for. Everything's reset to 0, and we're ready to rock out to the range.